welcome to Roasting the World, where we offer our adversarial perspective on today's cultural issues. We do it for the intelligent culture. I'm your host, Keenan Robinson, aka Confidence or Capone or whatever y'all want to call me, Mr. Robinson, but you know, it's a me. And we have a special guest today, and our special guest is.
Pilar.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm a current PhD student and I focus on financial literacy through post secondary education.
Okay. So our topic today to be roasted is financial literacy. So, in speaking about financial literacy, basically let's break that down. Financial. Make sure you talk louder. Financial, which is talking about money, investments, different things like that, and literacy is basically the knowledge of those things. So, in my life, I was not taught about stocks, bonds, student loan debt, how to make investments in properties and building your community up and building your finances. I kind of had to learn by trial and error. Got some bank accounts, overdrew accounts, got a lot of financial debt through student loans, cars, all of those kind of things until I kind of learned. And I know a lot of people kind of are coming into the situation kind of without that wealth of knowledge where someone is kind of telling them, hey, this is how you make these moves. This is how you survive. This is how you build your credit score up so that you are able to buy things. Because I notice a lot of people come from other countries and they're able to get like business loans to start in our communities. And those are some of the things that we're kind of lacking. So can you, based on because you're doing your dissertation on, can you kind of elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, so financial literacy is such a broad term. It's been very much research recently, and we focus on like stocks and bonds, but I'm focusing on mainly when it talks about higher education. And when we talk about financial literacy, that is an area that definitely needs to be searched. I know in a lot of the political agendas they talked about voting and like taking down student loan debt, and student loan debt has been a popular topic and it's been detrimental to a lot of millennials, a lot of young adults that are still having to pay for student loans and also trying to start their lives. So it's like, what do we do for the next generation? What have we learned? And I'm taking the time to look at the research and see like there is still a lack of financial literacy, especially when it comes to Black communities and higher education. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we give them the history that they need to show them that there's still economic inequalities, but also with those economic inequalities, what changes can we make so that the next generation doesn't have to be riddled with a lot of student loan debt?
Absolutely, because that's something that's stopping people from being able to invest in homes.
Right.
That's stopping you from, because now there used to be a time where they didn't look at your student loan debt for homes, and now they do, because I'm in the process of trying to buy a home, and they're telling me, well, how much do you owe? What are you going to be paying monthly? And because I'm in education, I'm with the teacher forgiveness loan program, but I mean you have to still do that for several years before you're able to get a percentage of it wiped away. But there are some people that are not in that particular field and they don't have those type of options. So when I was in college and I built up my student loan mountain of debt, they just kept, well, I'll say this, I needed it to survive, but no one told me, hey, you're going to have to pay this back and it's going to affect you in this way or this way because, I mean, it's a long piece of paper that say, read this. We don't read that, just to be honest, I didn't read it. Some people might, I didn't. I was like, okay, sign the paper, give me the money. And that's kind of what got me in a bad situation. But as I got older, I needed that information so that I could do other things that I wanted to do as a grown man in my life. And now that my daughter's in college, I'm talking to her about not getting into debt by going to college. I do really appreciate the 2 years that's free of college because that wasn't there for me when I came out of high school. So I can appreciate that because that at least gives them kind of a leg up as far as being able to at least get an associate's degree, some type of higher education to make them more competitive in the market, as well as globally, because we are actually global citizens.
Right.
And if you look at other countries, some of these other countries are defeating us by laps in making people in science, technologies, engineering, mathematics, And those are the areas that we really need to kind of hone in on so we can build infrastructure so they can run a world. But outside of that, what would you tell a high school student that's just about to graduate or a first year college student? What steps should they take in order to be successful in navigating these types of things? And then the second part of that is, what information do parents need to talk to their kids about in our communities? Because I do hear a lot of times that there are kids that come from other cultures that they know about credit cards, stocks, bonds, investments, all of these things at a young age. And we're too busy worried about cars and rap and sports and these other things, but not really digging into some of the elements that we really need to. They really need to put that course in high school about financial literacy. But I'm sorry, I digress. Go ahead.
So, what's really important to really think about is the beginning of the financial aid policy. Like you said, you use the loans to be able to get through college. When you talk to parents, people are not talking about the policy changes because financial aid started off in 1965 and it was to help people, middle class and low incomes people, be able to get through higher education. Now there have been continuously changes and federal funding has been cut, so people can't get grant money, which grant money you don't have to pay back, so people have to find other ways. And then it's been more heavy on student loans. So initially it was beneficial to be able to take a short amount of loans and be able to pay it off because the return in value was beneficial. So I think when it comes to like policy changes, it's important that parents understand and really look into the educational policy changes because those are going to affect your kids. If we're pushing for other things, we need to be pushing for more state funding, more federal funding, so that we can push back and get more grants, get more scholarships, get more programs. Outside of that, students really need to understand what type of options they have. Like you mentioned, community colleges. Now, a lot of states are including with this funding and allowing students to be able to go to school for 2 years free, and then they can transfer to 4-year institutions. We are already, as a Black community, behind financially because, for one, we didn't receive the reparations that we deserve. There's a lot of economic inequalities in a lot of different areas, housing markets. Now we focus on student loans. It's so many different areas, so you really have to understand, like, what are my initial options? You can't necessarily take the same path as the majority, but really figuring out if I'm already as a community starting below or behind financially, what other decisions do I need to make? So really looking at the options that you have, making community colleges, or really starting early with scholarships, really starting early with community organizations, maybe doing ACT or SAT prep and getting the community to be able to have a pocket or a grant so people can try that, so you can continuously by your senior year have a nice score so that you can get the top scholarships. Like really focusing on preparation in the beginning in high school, and really having people come back and talk to those communities, those places, and letting people know that like higher education is great, but there are also other careers, and you don't always have to get a 4-year degree. You can go to community college and be a mechanic, or you can be a person, and make tons of money.
Right.
So there are other alternatives, but really figuring out what the opportunities are in your based on state funding, federal funding, and really being able to like dig into the research and have people talk about that.
Absolutely, and that makes perfect sense. So, what advice would you give a first year student that is a first generation? Because I think you said that you were a first generation college student, as was I. What advice will you tell them, because they may not have that parent that's telling them, that's pushing higher education and telling them these type of things, but their plan is to go to these places, or they might go to the Air Force. So that would be a whole nother area of finances. But if you're doing it by yourself, what advice would you give? Because I know as a first generational college student, there are certain things that you learned that may be for someone out here in the world that may be listening that need that information.
So, what is the best resource is the internet. If
Okay.
you have aspirations to be able to go to college, if you're a freshman, there's nothing wrong with researching those top three institutions you like and calling the financial aid office and asking them what kind of scholarships do they have. It's nothing wrong with researching like how to fill out financial aid, what you would need in the beginning. So, it's having a plan can be beneficial, especially if you're a first generational student.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I want to go to Harvard or TSU or whatever institution, if I'm just calling, I'm getting that information. That information can all it can do is help me in the future. Just start early, freshman year. Just call around and do your research to see what scholarships may be available because there might be specific scholarships that you qualify for, but if you wouldn't have called and seeked out the information, you wouldn't even have known to apply for them. And you can allow yourself to prepare for what you need in those applications. So if a lot of the presidential scholarships or certain scholarships have a 3.0, so now I have a goal. So like I need to keep
Right.
that 3.0 so that I can apply for these type of scholarships. Oh, okay. So what other resources if I was a student, I'm trying to save money. Housing costs. Do I want to be a resident assistant? What
Mm-hmm.
work study programs do you have on campus? It's nothing wrong with asking in the beginning so that you know exactly what you're looking for and that you understand that what are the tuition costs and like how much money do I need to be able to afford to go to this institution is always important. That stuff is on websites. You can always call and figure out like where do I see myself in the next 5 years, 4 years, 2 years. That would be something I would tell like a
And make a
student.
plan.
A plan.
So what I think that I hear you saying is, even though we're talking to people that are not 18, they may be 15, 16, 17 years
Mm-hmm.
old. You need to have a plan. You need to start thinking about these things earlier than us as a culture are thinking about them as a whole. Some of
Right.
these other cultural groups, they know what they want to be at 3, 5, 8, 10 years old. They're already moving towards those pathways. Even if it's an auto mechanic, they're doing the work. So what I want us to do is to take some accountability and to start prepping earlier to get what we want on the back end. And that may be a heavy lift for some people, but I need you as students, high school, middle school students, to start prepping now for what you want to be in the future. If you know that you need a certain GPA to get into the school that you need to get into or to do whatever it is that you need to do, you need to start that now. We don't have time to play. We have to have a sense of urgency. Not that you can't be a kid, because yes, you gotta, enjoy, kid stuff and prom and all that kind of stuff, driving first times and all that. But you have to be goal driven. And if you know what you want to be, you'll attain that goal. Because what's happening now, statistically, we have a great many of our young kings and queens incarcerated. They're doing the what is it called, the median income for our young ladies is probably around 38, maybe 40,000. Our young men maybe 50,000, and honestly, that's okay. You can live off of that. That's average, but it's time for us to take our rightful place and be above average and be winning out here. Because, like I was telling you before about a nephew of mine who, went out and did some things that he wasn't supposed to do. And your response was that if we didn't have so much poverty, then they
Right.
wouldn't be forced to go out and do some of these things that they're doing.
Right.
And it is a bad decision. So there's accountability piece that needs to be there. But say you take this kid and you put this kid in a whole nother situation where he wasn't financially strapped, then you wouldn't be going out and doing these things and then end up in that same system, or you have to go sell these drugs, or you have to go, knock somebody over the head, or you have to go do something risky in order to get what you want out of life, because you're already making plans at an earlier age. So I want us to value education a lot more. I want us to learn about finances and different things like that. I want us to start being more entrepreneurs, starting business, coming together as a community and building things up, because we need that. We cannot afford to keep doing what we've been doing. We're going in a circular motion. It's not effective. We're not moving up to the 1 or 2 5% that's up here. We need to start, trickling down some of those finances to other small businesses and building them up, and just start bolstering ourselves up, and even to the government piece. I feel like if you really empower the most marginalized people of your country, that's going to grow the country as a whole.
Right.
And it may not be popular, but I mean, I feel like that's how you win as a country as a whole, to eliminate some of that poverty. So I know we're coming close to the end of our time.
Okay.
So at the end of our segments, we have what's called roast or toast or roast time, where if you want to roast something, that means that it's something that you feel like we don't need to discuss as a community. We got that. It's over with. Or if you want to toast something, there's something that you feel like is beneficial. You want to keep pushing it, and that you want to push to the community. And any final words or advice that you want to give to the audience?
So I just want to.
You want to roast or toast it?
Roast means good.
That you don't want it. Toasted means you want it for us. We need to talk about it more.
I want to toast it because I
Okay.
really want to toast really talking about the historical impact of economic injustice and how that has trickled down into higher education. I think we definitely don't talk about that because we still suffer from the wealth gap. For one black family, compared to a white family, they make 10 times as much. Like, we need to talk about that because we need to make different decisions. So without that information, we can't make the best decisions. So I definitely think that's something that moving forward we should start more conversations about that, and how we as a community can start closing that gap on the educational aspect, not just with how many people complete college degrees, but also how we're using those college degrees to increase your economic wealth throughout generations.
Absolutely. And just a shout out is going to be Dr. Pilar, probably early 2022, right?
Hopefully,
So
yes.
Dr. Pilar, look for her. You know, she's going to be in somebody's institute, being a boss somewhere. And, just want to shout that out. So thank you for joining us. Remember, subscribe, comment, click like, leave any of those things, share the content, because we are trying to grow and reach more people, because this is pertinent information. And until next time, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And thank you for joining us for another exciting episode of Roast in the World. Peace.